Are you a parent of a kid with learning differences or special needs? Do you find yourself getting into power struggles over and over again? Well, hello and welcome back to the Live Action Fitness Podcast with me, Coach Jason. I'm joined by friend of the program, Jen Dreyer from Raising Orchid Kids. Thank you for being here today.
I'm really happy to be here.
All right. So, Raising Orchid Kids, we were just talking about what that means. And as you can see, we're here in the greenhouse. So, what is an orchid? What is so special about Raising Orchid Kids? Why is it called that?
So we got this idea. So I have a partner named Gabrielle Nicolay, and we came up with this name together because she had read the book called The Dandelion and the Orchid by Thomas Boyce. And it talks about the idea of orchid kids versus dandelion kids. And dandelion kids are kind of those kids who just need a little bit of food, a little bit of sunshine, a little bit of water, and they can just really be happy and grow and thrive with minimal like struggles. And the orchid is a child who is needs a lot more, right? It, like the flower can thrive and be very beautiful, but it needs a lot of specific things like specific environment, a specific diet, a specific, sort of like schedule of watering and all those things. And so kids who are neurodivergent are a lot like orchids in that way, that they can thrive and really find their way to blossom in the world, but they need different circumstances and different supports than a neurotypical dandelion kid will be. And we always joke sometimes that there's like, the kids in between. Like I joke that my older
Mhm.
son's like a tulip. I'm like
Yeah.
he's not an orchid, but he's not really a dandelion either. He's like kind
Yeah.
of but he's leaning closer to dandelions, but he's definitely not an orchid. But my younger son is an orchid. I have an orchid kiddo who's autistic and ADHD and OCD and probably a few other acronyms in there.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
we run classes as Raising Orchid Kids. We are here to support parents to help them find the supports and environment and all the stuff that their particular variety of orchid needs. And there are many different orchid varietals, as we know. And, they all need something a little bit different, but they definitely all need something that is not the same thing that dandelions need. So that is kind of where we came to this work. And we run classes for parents, online classes, and what we do some workshops online too. And we do one-to-one coaching as well. And Facebook group and community. And we do run support groups as well for parents of orchid teens.
Yeah. And I've been following along and I absolutely love the program, especially helping parents who are the ones who are raising these orchid
Hmm.
kids. Okay. Because that is what is critical. And nobody is spending more time with the kids than the parents. Right. So in a way, you mentioned how important the environment is, because these orchid flowers are they're beautiful. There's something special about them and they're sensitive to their environment, okay? So, things that you might not think are a big deal could have a huge impact
Yeah.
on the orchid kid. Parents in a certain sense, as far as relationships go, you're a part of that kid's environment, aren't you?
Absolutely.
Right? So
Yeah,
that's
and
why, you're having a huge impact to help the ones who are raising the orchid kids. That's what's really gonna help these orchids flourish.
mhm. I mean, and just like the orchid, right? If your orchid isn't, you get some information. Oh, here are the things that generally are what you need to do to help this orchid flower grow. But then, when you try it out at home, it may or may not work in the same way that, you think it's supposed to work. And so then we have to start to tweak and we have to figure out, like, I have to use some information to know about, what other things do I need to change or tweak? And that's the same thing, that we may look at like, oh, if I have a child who's autistic, I might, think about what are typically some things that support autistic kids with this particular kind of a profile. And but then, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And, getting the coaching and getting the support to try to help kind of uncover and find different solutions. And sometimes just think outside the box for, what are some things that can help my child kind of
Yeah.
find his or her way in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just talking with one of the dads in the program this morning, doing some parent support. He's got an orchid kid with, some different special needs. And, you know, it's a mindset. you're understanding, like, if the kids are the orchids, who are you as the parent? You're really the gardener,
Yeah.
right? So it's really up to you, you're the one who needs to understand, like, the nutrients that these kids need, like the food you gotta feed these kids, kids need to be getting sleep at night. They have certain
Mhm.
sensitivities and they're unique, right? With this dad, I was also mentioning, your kid is off to such a great start and now they're on their own path. And as we go along, there's a tinkering process as well, like workshopping what works for your kid. So even though we're talking today, you know, there's no replacement for the one-on-one parent coaching or even as a group,
Mhm.
okay? But getting yourself a parent coach is critical, especially if your kid has some learning differences. Might need some help, and parents too, like, try different things, but also, like, just because you get some advice that you pulled off from the internet and then you're like, "Well, I tried that and that didn't work." Oh, it just doesn't work. So then you end up feeling stuck and kind of frustrated. But really, what I love about your program is that you provide this ongoing support for the parents. Okay, now that we tried this and maybe it didn't work, but we still learned something, right? So
Yeah.
we make some
Exactly.
adjustments
Yeah.
and keep going. And that's what actually is needed to raise these orchids.
Right. We always say that, so that is information, right? Behavior is information, it's communication. And so we try to coach, the big piece is that we try to coach parents to become detectives of their kids. Right. And so our job is to kind of unearth what's happening. We often talk about behavior as like an iceberg, right? And what we see is the top of the iceberg, the behavior that's visible, right? And there's all the stuff that's happening underneath. And we need to figure out and kind of try to unearth and figure out what's happening underneath, what's guiding that behavior, what's triggering it. And then we can start to address some of those things, right? So, do they need more connection? Do they feel disconnected? Do they feel like there's a sensory issue here and they're feeling overwhelmed, sensory things? And so then, what can we do? And then, the other piece that's really important is, just like when you're trying to raise beautiful flowers to do well, we're never going to make an orchid a tulip, right? Like it's not going to
Right.
become a tulip, right? It's not going to become a dandelion, right? And so we have to find out what it is that that particular plant needs to do well, right? And so that's the same thing with our kids. And so some of that is just kind of it's a process, right? And it's not always is actually almost never linear.
Yeah.
I always joke with my son that we're walking like, yeah, we're going 2 steps forward, well, 1 step back, now we're going sideways, sometimes we're going
Yeah.
diagonally. I was like, it's kind of on the whole, we're moving generally forward. It's like
Right. Right.
extremely alinear.
You have like a North Star,
Yeah, right.
but yeah, it's not just one straight line like, "Oh, no problem."
No.
Like
And dandelions tend to be straight lines,
mhm,
much more so than orchid kids.
right. That's so interesting, and, like, what if you thought you were raising a tulip or a dandelion, but you're not?
Mhm.
That might be useful,
Yeah.
I work with some families where, "Oh, well, so and so, like, we just got a new diagnosis, we're trying new medications," so, like, understanding what does your kid need, you might be missing something actually,
Yeah,
right?
and it can feel really overwhelming at first, you're just trying to and I think we also have to as parents recognize, especially when you get a new diagnosis, there's all the feelings that come with that, right? Like there's the guilt and the feeling of like I did something wrong, the failure, the shame, the like all the stuff that swirls around our own brains. And I think we need to unpack that and really kind of take it out, look at it, deal with it, and then you need to move forward and figure out how to, support the child that you have in front of you versus, the one that you were imagining you were going to have. And that's hard. It's hard work. And, whenever you can find other people who are navigating that similar relatable parenting journey, it just feels so much better because it can feel really overwhelming when if you're like, looking on social media at all these people with all these like perfect seeming families and kids and even when they're complaining about things, that you're like, oh, I wish that were my problem. That would be a great problem to have because
Right.
it's a much simpler problem than what I'm dealing with here. Finding the community can also be just so much of a relief.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. You're helping these parents be detectives, right? Gather information, you're looking for clues, because a lot of times the behavior, at first it's like, what I don't understand what's going, like, why would, why are we having a meltdown over this? I don't get it. And then once you really start to put the clues together, you get a bigger picture, which you're helping these parents to kind of zoom out and see that bigger picture, that journey that we were talking about, which is not linear,
Mhm.
right? But you keep going. That is everything,
Yeah.
just getting that bigger picture. And also, your courses that you offer for parents and the coaching that you're doing, you see, it's training, which is something that provides an experience, right? So, not just information, right? Where we could describe, what different behaviors could be about, and you just kind of give people some facts, about these special needs and neurodivergent kids and all that, but it's no substitute for the experience that you get in one of these learning courses.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we've been talking a lot about that sort of versus like the one-on-one coaching is also great too. We offer that as well, for people that we have the groups that we have are always small because we want to be able to give parents lots of individualized support. Um, and also you want to have provide the opportunity for parents to connect with one another, connect with other parents navigating kind of similar journeys. And we do this all, it's online, so it's sort of a different, it's different than it is, of course, in person. But I think there's so much to finding the community, but also to finding people who have kind of been down that path before, like, as I have, so most of the parents that we work with have younger kids. We also run classes for teens, parents of teens, not teens themselves, for the parents of teens. And so I have an older teenager, but my older son's a teenager. But Gabrielle's, her kids are both in college now. So she's been there too. And so having that a, expertise, but B, just like a sounding board, someone who can hear what you're saying, say it back to you, help you find what's going on, give you some, sort of marching orders, like, here, try this week and see how it goes, and then come back to us. We've so much of it is also just, that ability to shift your perspective, as you were saying before, especially when you have this, especially with a new diagnosis, when you have to rejigger kind of what you were imagining, your child's life might be like, and your life might be like, to find, some supports and ideas for kind of how do I shift? I need some help with like shifting kind of my brain. And it's really
Yeah.
easy when, especially when you first get that diagnosis, when you like just go deep into that rabbit hole. Like I remember when, my son was under 2 when we, basically got the pre-diagnosis for autism. And I was imagining him at like age 40 living at home. Like he's 2. Why? I was just,
Right.
really catastrophizing. And it's so easy to go there. And I often tell this story in our classes about I went on I'd gone, I'm a yoga teacher also, and I'd gone on a meditation retreat. And the meditation teacher, we had a little time with her individually. And I told her, like, my autistic son was 4 at the time. I was feeling overwhelmed. And she said, "You look, I don't have the experience of raising, a neurodivergent kid, but I will tell you this, take care of what's in front of you." And that was
Mm.
just always so powerful to me, that idea of like, if we can just figure out how to take care of the child who's in front of us right now versus, the child who we're like imagining in 40 years, it's just so much more. It feels much calmer and less overwhelming. But also then you're actually taking care of what your, child might need. It's just a more effective strategy.
Right. Yeah, that's very interesting. So there are a couple things that made me think of it. You're staying more present in the moment and just giving your kid whatever they need at that time, so they might need some directions, they might need some prompting, like, you point at the shoes, like, it's
Mhm.
time to get your shoes on,
Right.
or maybe they just need you to be quiet for a moment and be calm because they're upset, right? That co-regulation piece that we
Yes.
talked about before,
Mhm.
so you're doing what you need to do in the moment, and that's also, it goes back to gardening. right? You're like, is this the time to water the plant? Is this the time to give some nutrients, some miracle grow? Is this the time to, you know, let it be, come back
Mhm.
later, everything's fine? You just kind of monitor what's going on, but stay in that moment and see what does your kid need right now instead of just thinking like about the future. Of course, in your mind, all these
Mhm.
problems can just exist, like, "Oh, no, we're gonna have to go taking so and so to the grocery store, and they're gonna have a meltdown in the, cereal aisle," and,
Mhm.
but you're not there yet. You're not there right now,
Mhm.
so you
I
gotta
mean, they
handle
might
things
have the
at the time.
meltdown, and
Yeah, they
so if you
might.
know that that's an option, then, like, what can we do
Right.
in advance to try to mitigate that, right? And
Yes.
also, if I'm shifting my expectations to know, I'm not gonna expect that my kid's gonna, like, be in the grocery store and it's gonna go awesome all the time, right? Like, there's
Yes.
a chance that, certain things are gonna trigger my child, and so if I know that, then when it happens, I feel less angry because 'cause I'm like, "Oh, yeah, okay, it's happening." Right? So
Right.
there's a little bit of, like, the prediction piece that's not bad, like, we wanna
Oh, sure, yeah,
prepare,
yeah,
right? So we wanna, like, prepare for what's potential, like, based on the information that we have from past experiences, right, with our kids.
yeah,
And so, that's the other thing that we talk to parents a lot about is, one thing that's really important for parents to know is that, like, behavior is, like, the one thing that they don't control. Like, you cannot control your kid's behavior. That is 100% up to your child. We can help them before the behavior happens. We can try to help after the behavior happens to try to, sort of mitigate what goes on when whatever it is triggered that. And we always say your best return on investment is to do the before part, right? What do I need to do to
yeah.
set my child up for success, right? So instead of having to, like, deal with my dying orchid or my orchid that's, like, not doing well here, like, what can I do to set my orchid plant up to, like, have an environment that seems likely to help it thrive?
Right. You wanna set it up for success. So that takes planning. So that's what I mean. Like, so now in your mind, you can think about, what's gonna happen when we go to the grocery store. Maybe there's some, we're gonna be in church and oh, everyone's gonna have to be real quiet, but my kid's not very quiet, well, whatever it is, but now what you're planning and preparing in the moment right now. And sometimes that's what needs to happen.
Mhm.
Right. So it's not just like running around chasing a bunch of fires and trying to put them out. Like, oh my God, I'm, struggling here. It's like maybe the thing to do now, right, is, do a little bit of parent coaching training, right? Get a little bit of planning, like doing the detective work, right? So if you know that your kid has these behavior patterns, you start to analyze the pattern, right now. So you do a little analysis here that helps you predict the future, right? Because that's what makes it a pattern. And then you can tinker, right? Maybe we
Mhm.
could avoid this fire, right? By making a little adjustment, right? Maybe I could, modify the environment in a way,
Mhm.
that avoids these issues. And also all of these behaviors just, you know this, but for anybody else, we use this framework like before the behavior and after the behavior, right? The behavior is, think
Mhm.
of that in the middle. And, oftentimes, we're analyzing these, like we said, these fires. They're like, how do we stop the kid from having, this meltdown or this outburst or whatever kind of, he worked with kids with all sorts of problems. Sometimes kids can even become aggressive or they say
Mhm.
stuff that's inappropriate. Some kids go so far as to injure themselves. Some kids run away. There's all sorts of like extreme like problems here, problems there.
Mhm.
Like, oh my God. Also the whole framework also applies to good behaviors, right?
Yeah.
It's any behavior. And,
Yeah.
and that's the thing. So you can actually set the scene for the behavior you want to happen. And
Mhm.
then, when it comes to the consequence afterwards, actually, it's like time for rewards. It's time for celebration. You did
Mhm.
it. You did whatever it is I needed you to do. I needed you to get your shoes on so we could get out the door. That was phenomenal. I love that. Like, look
Mhm.
how great a job
Thank
you're
you. So
doing, right?
helpful. Right.
We're on
I mean,
time.
yeah.
We're doing it.
And kids really, I mean, this is all kids want to feel competent and they want to feel like they're connected to their parents and to the people in their family. They want to feel connected and they want to feel competent. And whenever we can let kids feel competent, it and especially our orchid kids who we tend, and again, this is like where you find Gabrielle and I call this finding the just right challenge. Like, what is the just right challenge for your child? Right. And then be there and help them achieve that just right challenge. And then they feel great. And then that's going to beget, like success begets success. Right. They're going to feel really good. On the flip side, when we get angry at our kids for doing something, right? Like, it it cycles that way too, right? So that, that I think the shame doesn't teach them like to do better, right? Want to give them those places where they can be successful, right? And so if
Yep.
like going to the grocery store for like your whole long list of stuff, if you go to the grocery store once a week and you like spend a half hour getting lots of stuff, that is probably not a great time to take your kid who like that's hard for them to be at the grocery store. So I might take my child for like I need to just pick up like bread and apples today, And so like when I need a short one, like I'm gonna find that like short blip of success thing, right? And so that planning piece is really important and to find the ways that we can find successes and create
Yep.
successful experiences for our kids are the ways that kind of we help those to increase.
Yeah, absolutely. We can't say that enough, right? Because a lot of times, parents, if anyone who's stressed out about the difficulty of parenting, especially in the modern day and age, there's social media and algorithms and screen time and so on. And oh my God, you're like pulling your hair out. It's like,
Mhm.
well, you're focusing on the problems instead of focusing on the achievements and the success, and that maybe sound easy, but really, like what you just gave an example of, it's great because in order to achieve success, consider breaking the tasks, like what you're
Mhm.
asking the kids to
Yeah.
do, into something that is smaller and more achievable. And then you help them as much as needed to achieve, right? To complete this task, whatever it is, and then you're celebrating, you're giving them the rewards, okay?
Mhm.
So it's positive. And
Mhm.
that, right, like you said, success begets success. So I think 80 to 90% of the time with these behaviors, you gotta be achieving success and then celebrating with
Mhm.
rewards. And then the stress and the problems, like any sort of, like, punishment type thing, I mean, that's, like, not the main strategy, just first of all, that's, like, not what
Mhm.
you should focus on, and even if you have to do that, it's probably best, like, 10 to 20% maximum.
Mhm.
That's probably you want to focus on the achievements and the rewards, instead of stressing about the problems and, "Oh, my kid's having a meltdown because the screen time has to you gotta put your iPad away, it's time to go to bed, and then we're having an issue," right? But meanwhile, do some practice rounds. Like you said,
Mhm.
take this big task, go into the grocery store. You have like 100 things you gotta get because 'cause you're a busy family, okay? If it's a goal to have your kid do better in the grocery store, do practice rounds, and you might
Mhm.
depending on the problem the kid is having, maybe picking up 2 items, right? That's short and sweet. He can do that, and once you get the repetition, okay, maybe next time you have time to pick up 3,
Mhm.
okay, you build it up from there, but only from building your history of success,
Mhm.
which is what we were talking about earlier, where the kids learn from experience. They don't just learn from information. It's the
Yeah.
same thing with the parents, we were talking about earlier with parent coaching, right? So you have to give the kids the experience of them achieving in order for them to build and feel competent.
Yeah, and that's actually a brain wiring thing. We talk a lot about in our classes. We talk a lot about neurobiology, and sort of like what's happening internally for our kids and how so much of their behaviors are driven by what's happening physiologically for them. And how do we, figure out what might be going on there and how do we meet those needs? But there's this phrase that what's fired gets wired. And so things that happen and now for our kids, our neurodivergent kids, our orchid kids, they're what's called working memory is kind of what that is, right? And so when working memory is remembering is like your brain's ability to remember what happened the last time we were in the situation and then take it and apply it to the next time. Now, this doesn't always happen in the same way that it would for us or for neurotypical kids with our neurodivergent kids. So sometimes it takes a few more times at that very, like, like
Yeah.
simple 2-item level or whatever it is, for some kids, it might take a little bit more. And so we just have to recognize that, right? And that's just information. Like, okay, my kid's working memory needs more support than, than my other child or than, someone else's child might. And so that what's fired gets wired thing might take it might take a few firings to get some wiring. Just good to kind of keep in mind
Yeah.
that, we might need to
Repetition.
stay at this like kind of lots of repetition at this level till we like completely crush it and master it and then let's go to the next thing. Again, it's
Yeah.
just what feels like the just right challenge for your particular child in like that particular area.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so fascinating. I do. Yeah, we got to maybe dig more into neuroscience another
Mhm.
day, but it's the way it all works. It's just incredible. And that's also our memories, are also tied to our location, like the
Mhm.
context, the environment that we're in when we have that experience.
Mhm.
This is also why people probably, for the adults here, when you go studying for a test, you want to study in like a quiet library that's pretty
Mhm.
similar to the classroom environment
Mhm.
in which you're going to take the test.
Mhm.
Right? So, yeah, you practice, get your kid into the grocery store if you need to work on
Mhm.
it, and then who knows? Maybe, okay, maybe they had an issue with 2 items and then you know, it was still overwhelming, right? Next time you go back, maybe it's just 1, or maybe you even just look at the grocery store. As
Mhm.
crazy as that sounds,
Yeah.
right? Just kinda like, "Look, this is us. We drove there. This is the grocery store. Now we go home and we call it, right? You like bank it, like put it in the
Mhm.
bank before something goes wrong,
Mhm.
right? Just be like, okay, we're done. Like, and that
Yeah.
is a successful repetition. And then next time you build on top of that.
I highly recommend doing stuff like that for things like going to the dentist, which can be really triggering for some kids.
Right.
Like going beforehand and just going and just looking at the office, right? Like going to, drive in, check it out. I don't have to be in the chair, but I'm just looking around and seeing it. And the other thing too that I think is important for parents to know is that there's something that we call performance inconsistency that like, today I woke up, I didn't sleep very well last night. So like my ability to tolerate something that I tolerated yesterday really well, like, might not happen for
Yeah.
me. Like, I didn't have my coffee this morning. Like, if I didn't have my coffee, like, I had to fast, I had to go to the doctor and do all my blood work, and I didn't get to have my coffee. And
No,
I was like a lot crankier and like
no.
things that normally would roll off of me were like bugging me in ways that and so this happens for our kids, and I have a fully formed prefrontal lobe. Like our kids are really not, that's not
No.
formed until 25, and that's for neurotypical kids. So for our kids, usually it's later.
Yeah, no, that's such a good point. And I bet you it'll take time to do like longitudinal studies. I bet you it's gonna take even longer in the future. Like kids are taking longer to become fully functional,
Mhm.
independent adults,
Yeah.
but that's another conversation. But
Mhm.
you bring up a great point that we called it the modifying operation, if I'm not mistaken
Mhm.
here. Because it's if you think about how hard would you work for a cup of water? I
Yeah.
don't know. It depends. It depends on how
Mhm.
thirsty you are. Like if you're
Right.
in the desert,
Yeah. That's
oh,
true.
you'll do whatever.
Right.
You see, and that's the same thing. So the modification, like, to understand what's going on, like, "Oh, the kid didn't sleep well." You have to keep all these factors in mind, and that's
Mhm.
okay, right? Because 'Cause you're gonna live for another day, can always go back. Also, it happens for these rewards that you're giving, right? Like, this kid gets plenty of screen time, so maybe he's not, like, motivated by that anymore.
Mhm.
You have to keep that in mind,
Mhm.
like, you get kinda overwhelmed or kinda habituated to these things, and that
Mhm.
affects how much you desire to get them. What are you working towards? All these factors come into play, not just the task that you want them to do or the behavioral reaction that the kid had. There's all these things, everything counts. And just to tie it together, with the orchids, like everything counts, the nutrients count, the light counts, the environment count. Are there other plants there? Is it in a pot all by itself, or does it have a
Mhm.
community of other, plants in this garden? Does it get support every day, every week, whatever? You just got to think about that big picture because
Mhm.
now there are more levers to pull than most parents realize,
Mhm.
right? Because now let's say your kid's struggling with, uh, who say it's anxiety, okay? Or like mood swings, okay? And you're trying to handle it. This kid has a mood swing and you're trying to handle it in the moment, but also, that's going to be tough because you're like trying to put out the fire while it's raging. Okay.
Mhm.
That's hard. But also,
Yeah.
maybe if you, in the big picture, maybe you modify your sleep routine, right? You start coming up
Mhm.
with a sleep routine. The kid's calmer. He's getting a better quality and quantity of sleep. And now his mood is more stable. Okay. So it's a kind of indirect way to get the outcome that you want and support that kid instead of just trying to like fight it like so head on. Right.
So true. Yeah.
So lots of leverages, lots of levers to give you leverage as a parent. Right? So I just want to touch on a few kind of scenarios here. All right. Let's think about, parents here relatively close, to the beginning of the school year. Some kids are in new schools, new environments. So what if I was a parent who said like, "Oh my god, Jen, my kid is struggling. They're having these outbursts, emotional outbursts. Sometimes they have to go home early from school.
Mhm.
They're getting triggered. They're having a hard time fitting in, but they want to, but then, something goes wrong and then they're having, some dysregulation and emotional outbursts at
Mhm.
school. I don't know what to do. Can you help me?"
Yeah, and so I would always start with, so like behavior happens for a reason, right? It's communication. So what are we learning from the behavior, right? Like school feels overwhelming at times, right? There's something that's happening at school in particular that's triggering that behavior. So then I mean, it's hard because we're not in school with our kids, right? And so this is where we
Yeah.
need to rely on teachers and school staff to help fill in those gaps for us and our kids too, right? Depending on how old they are. Like a 3-year-old is not going to give you like a whole lot of information, but like a 10-year-old can give you a lot of information about what might be happening for them in that moment, or what might be happening that's bothering them. And often it's not things that we are like, that we know are bothering them or that we would guess. And so it's often things that, that we can't predict. It could be that something, I mean, it could be that they're not having the right supports at school, right? Like, it could be that the school itself is not the right setting for them.
Yeah.
And we've coached lots of parents on, shifting their kids. They realized, after a while that like the school setting was not the right one for their kiddo. I mean, I've had this experience myself, and we kept trying and trying. I was like, no, but it seems okay. It seems okay. So there's lots of things to kind of dig into and look at. And that's where you start to have the meetings with teachers. I mean, so parents come in and meet with the school staff to figure out what might be triggering that behavior, right? And what can we do in advance? Let's get some information from the child, structure a conversation with them in a way that is not
Mm.
shaming, like, hey, it seems like you've been having a hard time at school, right? And so that's the other thing that we want parents to kind of shift and teachers and like we want all the people that are supporting our kids to be able to shift their lens from like he's giving me a hard time or he's doing this to me to like he's having a hard time or she's having a hard time, right? And if we can shift that
Mm.
it just makes us more compassionate and it makes us look at and as much as we can think about it as like problem solving, right? So the problem is that my child is struggling in the afternoon every day at school, right? My
Mm.
child is struggling at recess every day at school, right? What are the times when it's happening? So what? Let's like, drill down to what is it? What's getting in the way, right? Where is this happening? When is this happening? And then we can look back. Did he eat his lunch? Right? Like,
Mhm.
is he hungry? Is he tired? What else might be going on? Does he actually or she need like actual more supports with learning how to play with other kids. Recess is brutal.
Yeah.
It is like dog eat dog out
Out on
there.
your
I
own.
mean, that is rough when it's really unstructured, you know? I mean, some kids will do well there, but I mean, it's tough. And so maybe we find some solutions for what can we do to set up that child for success at recess, right? Like maybe we have a plan. Okay, at recess, let's find one child for you to connect with, and that child, you know, you can pick in advance one thing that you might do with that kid. Or maybe I stay with my teacher at recess and
Mhm.
you know, something like that. So those are the solutions that would basically you want to drill down and figure out what's really going on, what's happening underneath that iceberg of the behavior, and then what can we do to set up that child to find more success in that situation or find a better situation, right? Like move the orchid to like a better location
Yeah.
that is going to, you know, be a better fit. So, you know,
Right.
so those are like kind of the big questions to ask, I would say. But you know, but there's real solutions for that. And these things are really common problems that parents that we work with bring to us.
Right. Exactly. And that, you gotta get into that. You're looking at the kid as an individual, and meeting with the school staff, like you said, I think is critical, and for you, like helping the parents and just working, as a detective to gather the clues and see what's going on, because you can think of these, behavior challenges as a message, and a lot of times the message is like coded. It's like a cryptic
Yes. It's hard to,
cipher, right? You have to
yes,
decipher the
absolutely.
message in order to really understand what's going on here. So you need the clues in order to do that. Like you said, maybe, you know, not just talking with the parents, sorry, parents and the school staff, but also if they had a record of what was going on before,
Yeah.
during, and after, right? That is big because a lot of times I think we're like, well, I think this one time it's sort of what, you're going off of like it's like eyewitness testimony, right?
Hmm.
Although you may or may not have even been there, but even if you were, you're trying to like recall off the top of your head, like, well, here's what happened, right? But meanwhile, if you actually create a record, of the behavior and what was going on before, what happened after, you might actually see a picture and a pattern, right, that you could not have detected otherwise, you
Yeah.
know? Help you
Completely.
zoom out.
Completely. Completely.
So, one more little scenario here, for kids who are stuck doing the same thing every day, as I see some kids worked with several kids, they're, stuck wearing either the same shirt every day, right?
Hmm.
They're like, it's like a rigidity type of
Hmm.
issue, right? Which is super common. There are kids who they gotta do the same little ritual, they gotta do, whatever the pattern is, but some kids, they're stuck wearing the same clothes every day or stuck eating the same foods. Are there some ways that we could help these kids kinda get unstuck?
Yeah, and so a lot of times, I mean, I have this my son had this for like a long time. I mean, he it's a very limited diet. He eats all the food groups, but like very limited things within those things.
Mm.
But also the clothing thing reminded me a lot of when he was younger, the transition from like right now or right in it, you know, and it's like we've got to stop wearing shorts and short sleeve shirts like
Yeah,
right now, you know, and
yeah,
that's hard. That transition feels confusing to kids. For some kids, this is really important to understand that like those like the repetitive things, the routines feel safe and it helps them feel safe. And other things feel unsafe, right? Like if you like lots of autistic adults, I like listen a lot to autistic adult voices and they often say they call those kinds of foods, they call them safe foods versus unsafe foods. And that's like a great way to
interesting.
think about it, right? And
Yeah,
so, like, when my child is like a little cranky, like, I am not going to try a new food then. You know, like, that's not the time. He's not open to something that feels a little unsafe. If he's feeling really good, he's really rested. I was like, hey, do you think you want to taste this thing? Right. So, you might try again, find the just right challenge. You know, you can set goals. Like with foods, we did for a little while, we were doing a challenge where we were trying to see how many different plants we could eat in a week, right? And like, you know, like
mm,
we could eat like a red pepper. I was like, we even went like red pepper and green pepper. We had them count differently. Like that's fine, you know.
that's 2
Two,
right there, we're at 2 in the
and
bank.
then we ate some apple and some pear and some banana. You know, and you can really like add, and those are little fun kinds of challenges. Like you can do stuff like that to kind of gamify or make it fun. I know, like that's that's like all of what you do is gamifying things, right? which is so great for so many of our kids. But so that's a strategy, but finding that right time. But the other thing that you can do, one thing that we did with my son was he like always wanted to wear long sleeve things, and it was hard for him to transition to like summer. I was like, you're gonna be really hot. Like for like long sleeve shirts and pants and like DC summer, like all the time, you're gonna be really uncomfortable. So we created a social story for him, like a social narrative that, sort of went through. So those are different ways that you can help
Yeah.
teach into like, oh, I do this because it feels more comfortable. Right. And then
Right.
let's go outside. Let's feel what it feels like. Now, for some kids, their sensory systems are a little off,
Right.
they
Right.
might not feel the cold or they might not feel the hot in the same way. And and then you also have to pick your battles, right? And like don't die on every hill, right? And so with my son, like he goes to school in the summer. He's got an 11-month school program. And so he
Mm.
goes to school in July through early August for 5 weeks. And his brain wants to wear pants to school. He's like, I wear pants to school. That's what I do at school.
Right.
He wears a short sleeve shirt and he'll wear slides, instead of like sneakers, but he likes to wear pants. And I was like, okay, fine. You can wear pants to school. It's okay. Like he's got a reasoning around it.
Mhm.
And that's kind of what I've decided I'm going to like let him have that. But so I think some of it is one, finding the places where you can help it feel less scary and less unsafe. And I think the other piece is just validating for them that this feels hard. It feels hard and feels confusing, right? To start to wear short, like long sleeve shirts when you're so used to wearing short sleeve shirts, right? Like that's funny. And here's why we do it.
Right.
Just not being judgy and shaming about it, and just taking that space where I'm going to try to validation goes a really long way. Like when you can validate someone's feelings, like they feel seen, right? And when
Mhm.
they feel seen, their nervous system is less triggered. When nervous systems are less triggered, they're more open to doing new things and things that feel a little bit less safe. And so,
Yeah.
whatever we can do to help them feel really calm when they go to try something new, usually once it happens, like, once my son figured it out, like, oh, the shorts, okay, the short sleeve shirt, okay. Now he wears
Mhm.
shirts and shorts, no problem. Like, that's the other thing too, is that a
Yeah.
lot of times we get stuck on stuff, and many times some of those rigidities can shift as kids age.
Yeah. No, there are so many helpful tips in what you just said right there. Exactly about feeling safe, right? Cues of safety, cues of danger, with things that are new, they kind of feel like threatening in a certain way. And social stories, right? So even before you actually have the kid do it, like also, it's a good example, like you brought up the dentist earlier, because a lot of kids, that is uncomfortable and it's hard to make it comfortable and practice it. But even just having a story where you talk about how this is going to go,
Mm-hmm.
you're getting them a little more familiar with it and a little more comfortable. It's a little bit
Mm-hmm.
more in their comfort zone, and that just right challenge. Is that what you call it?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Maybe as a mom, you don't have to get your kid to put this new shirt on and wear it all day at school. Maybe in the
Yeah.
morning, they look at the shirt the alternative shirt as a possibility. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
they touch the shirt. Maybe,
Mm-hmm.
who knows? Maybe they could put it on and take it off and then
Yeah.
still wear the shirt that they are used to
Mm-hmm.
wearing. Right. But then they put it on
Right.
just for one moment, take it back off. You're done. You did it. That's super helpful advice.
Yeah, and I
Thank
think
you.
that idea of like whatever we think is like our goal, we always tell parents break it into small chunks and then take each of those small chunks and like, probably cut them into quarters. Like whatever you think is the just right next step
Yeah.
probably needs to be cut at least in half.
Yeah,
Um,
it's
so
shocking how fine-grained you can go when
mhm,
you start going down that rabbit hole, but it is really helpful to start the kids, on their like, building that history of success. That's what you
mhm,
need to do. You
yeah,
have to break it down, like, more than you would expect, but that's what a parent coach like you can help parents
mhm,
do,
yes, we can
you
like
know?
help together break down how do we do what is
Yeah.
that just right thing. Yeah.
So, this was fantastic. Where can people find you? How do people sign up?
We are at raisingorchidkids.com is our website, www.raisingorchidkids.com. We also have a Facebook group and we also have a Facebook page. So if people are on Facebook, we also are on Instagram and LinkedIn. We have a class coming up on starting actually in 2 days, on October 17th. That's one of our what we call our core course. It's an ongoing 8-week class. We're going October 17th through December 12th. We're skipping Thanksgiving week. We
Or
meet on Thursdays from 12 to 1 Eastern time. We record all the sessions. We have a kind of private part on our website with all the documents and everything where people can access it. And we also offer a sliding scale for folks if they need it in terms of the cost. We offer this for parent. We love when both, if there's parenting partners, if they both come, that's, always
yeah.
great for us. And we also have an upcoming parent support group for parents of orchid teens starting at the end of October. So all that stuff's on our website. We're going to do in December, we're going to do a webinar on thrive/survive the holidays, so those are all the things coming up. So we also have a great blog that we send out every other week. So you can, all that stuff's on our website. So there's a space to sign up, and we do free consults or 15-minute consults if people are curious. I don't know about the course or want just, kind of ask about what ways they can get supported.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, yeah, you don't have to start with, like, everything, but, just
Yeah.
get connected, and, I've been following you guys, loving everything that you're putting out from the podcast to, helpful
Mhm.
emails, and then, of course, you've got that online course for parents, so you are not alone,
Mhm.
parents,
Yeah.
okay? So, thank you, Jen, I had a blast.
Thanks. Nice talking with you. That was great.
Okay, bye-bye.